buddy, put that thing back in its holster. We haven't gone anywhere.
I don't understand.
Check out the MichaelDukesShow.com for information on how to get access to the podcast.
Welcome to the party, pal.
The Michael Dukes Show.
The greed and the entitlement is astounding to me.
What more could you want from a low-budget radio program?
This is a dumpster fire.
That was just BS.
It is time to get a new perspective.
We know just what you need, and we've got just the cure. Open wide and prepare for a steaming hot cup of freedom.
I just don't fathom it.
The Michael Dukes Show, streaming live across the world.
Live around the world on the internet at michaeldukeshow.com and across the state of Alaska on this, your favorite radio station and or FM translator. Good morning, and how are you? Welcome to the program. It is the Michael Dukes Show, and we are ready to jump into this for the Tuesday edition of the show. That means, of course, the weekly deep dive with Brad Keithley from Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets, and we are going to get into it here in just a hot second. In hour two of the big radio program, we're going to be joined by Chris Story, the man from Homer, who comes on normally at the end of every Tuesday, at the end of the second hour, every Tuesday. But today he's coming on to talk about his new book once more. It's being released. We're going to get the full rundown from him and talk about all the details of it. And so we'll be visiting with him early before we get into our normal segment, where we will then cover the PMA and the life coaching lesson that we normally have this week. It's a beautiful day. We're ready to go. Are you all ready to jump in? The weekly beatings will now commence until morale improves. That's exactly what it's not that bad. It really isn't. It's good stuff, but sometimes it is a little irritating. That there is no doubt. Let's jump into it with Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets, and see what kind of damage he has in store for us today. Hello, my friend. How are you this morning?
I'm doing good, Michael. Something just went off in my. Hang on, just a second. I'm not sure what's. Let me just mute it. There we go.
Got something running in the background.
I do.
Yeah, the latest news. I love some of these websites, these news websites. As soon as you click on them, they start throwing up windows everywhere to watch all these news stories. And I'm like, I wanted to read the one story, not to watch all the stuff. So, Brad, it's Tuesday. Here we are, ready to get into it. You've got the full rundown now of all the new slate of legislative candidates and everything else, and we're ready to dive into this. So let's get started. First and foremost, with number one of the weekly top three, which basically is the future is not what some of us think it is. Now, I don't know exactly what that means, but you can give us an idea. What do you mean the future is not what we think it is? Because I'm not saying it's bleak, but there's a lot of work ahead of us.
Well, I want to do this segment in front of talking about candidates because I think it's important to sort of lay the groundwork. And the genesis for this segment comes from an op-ed, a not particularly remarkable op-ed, but a community op-ed that was in the ADN this week. The title of it was, "It's time to consider a new permanent fund, one just for education." Basically, the author's arguing that we ought to set up a second permanent fund that would fund education, and that's an idea that's been kicked around. But here's the core of the argument, and I'm afraid it's the core of what a lot of people are thinking about the future of Alaska, given Pika and Willow, the additional volumes that are coming on from Pika and Willow. The state here's the argument: the state constitution needs to be changed to have a permanent education fund, just like the existing permanent fund. This should be a nonpartisan effort to accomplish something that has never been done by any state for all education for all children. Many projects are, and this is where he's talking about Pika and Willow, many projects are coming on board in our state soon with either or both, either Pika or Willow or both, becoming a reality. The state can expect a revenue windfall. That's the predicate for the argument that we ought to have a separate permanent fund for education. Is the predicate, frankly, for an argument that I hear from a lot of people of all we have to do is survive the next couple of years and we'll be fine. That's not true. It's not even close to being true. And to demonstrate that, I've been working on a chart that will be in this week's Alaska Landmine, but one which I want to talk about now on the show first. What I've done is gone to the spring revenue forecast and taken the numbers from the government's, the Department of Revenue's spring revenue forecast that are for unrestricted UGF petroleum revenue. And our petroleum revenue, the state's petroleum revenue, comes in basically 5 pieces. One is production tax. The second is oil and gas royalties. Those are the categories most closely tied to production levels. And then petroleum corporate income tax, petroleum property tax, and bonuses, rents, and interest, which really don't amount to much. I want to focus on the first two, production tax and oil and gas royalties, because that's where both the author of that commentary and a lot of other people that I listen to, talk to, think is going to be where we're going to have a windfall over the next 10 years. This chart looks out over the entire period covered by the most recent revenue forecast put out by DOR. The top line shows production volume, and indeed, there's a huge uplift that DOR is including in the revenue forecast for production volume. It goes from 463.8 million cubic feet a day, 1,000 cubic feet a day, whatever it is. And it's not cubic feet, it's barrels, 1,000 barrels per day. Got to get over to my oil side. 463.8 thousand barrels a day in FY25 rises to 633,000 barrels a day by FY33. That's a growth rate over that period, just on average, 4.6%. A huge growth rate. But let's look at the revenues that DOR is forecasting will be derived from that. Production tax volume over that period between FY25, while we're having a 4.6% annual growth rate in production volume, production tax revenues over that period go from $752 million down to $658 million, a decline over that period. While we're having this boom in production volumes, a decline in production tax over that period, an annual decline of 1.6%. Oil and gas royalties go from $1,052 million in FY25 to $1,133.9 million in FY33 over that 8-year period, against a production volume increase of 4.6%, annual production volume increase of 4.6%. We're seeing only a growth in royalties of 1%. Net, adding those two together, compared to a production volume increase of 4.6% over that period, production-related revenues to the state, the addition of production tax plus oil and gas royalties, goes down 0.1%. And the only reason it's only down 0.1% is because of FY33. If you look at the numbers from FY25 to FY32, the numbers are there's a much steeper decline over that period than once you kick in FY33, which is the beginning of the Willow volumes. So we aren't seeing this windfall that both the author of the article and some other people out there are saying are going to occur. Corporate income tax goes up 4% annually over the period. That's good. It goes up, but there's a hole in the corporate income tax. One of the production companies, a big part of the production companies, isn't subject to the corporate income tax because of the Hill Corp loophole. So it doesn't go up as much as it would if the Hillcorp loophole was closed. I put the Hillcorp loophole down at the bottom. If it grew at the same rate as the remainder of the corporate income taxes, the other companies that are paying corporate income tax, the Hillcorp closing the Hillcorp loophole would raise revenues, state revenues from the oil companies by about 6%. Petroleum property tax goes up a little bit. It goes up 0.7% annually over that period. Bonuses, rents, and interest are forecast to stay the same over the period because they're not very significant, and frankly, DOR doesn't take the time to try to really dig into them and figure out where they're going. So, but the point of this is very simple. Some people are thinking, oh, just get me through the next couple of years. Then we're going to be starting having this windfall from Pika and from Willow, and all of a sudden everything's going to be better again. That's just not true. Yes, there is a slight bit of growth from petroleum revenue in total over the period, 0.4% annually. And yes, there is some growth in the POMV, the draw from the POMV, draw from the permanent fund, the POMV draw from the permanent fund, less permanent fund dividends. There is some growth in that, about 3% annually. But those aren't near enough to offset what's projected to be a 2.5% annual growth in spending over that period. We just keep digging the hole deeper. As spending is projected to go like this over the period, revenues are projected at best to stay even. And if you look at oil revenues, which is supposedly where this windfall is coming from, they're in decline over that period. So it's people who are jumping on, people who are saying, yeah, how are we going to spend this windfall? We need to create a separate permanent fund for education. We need to do this. We need to do that. We need to increase spending here. We need to increase spending there. People who are jumping up and down saying that are not dealing in reality. That's not what the projections are telling us.
Well, what really stuck out in this article to me was his acknowledgement that the permanent fund idea was genius because the policymakers knew that no politician of any party could be trusted not to spend every last nickel available to them. This is the same today, overspending and no long-term thinking for solutions. So he acknowledges the fact that government's going to consume every dollar it can, and then he completely ignores all the falderall that's going on with the permanent fund board right now. He keeps going on and on about having a nonpartisan board that determines who gets the money and what and everything. It's all going to be politicized, and they're going to consume every dollar anyway. I mean, it's just shocking to me that this is the answer instead of, are you getting what you're paying for with the money we're spending right now at $17,000 per student in schools, plus the state money, plus the federal money, plus it's insane.
It is, Michael. And it's not, the predicate for the argument that he's making is, look, we pay too much in property taxes. So we got to shove these dollars, we got to shove this responsibility off on somebody else. And let's create this permanent fund for education, and that'll replace dollars that otherwise are being paid in property taxes. Rather than we're paying too much in property taxes, we have to get spending under control. We're paying too much in property taxes. Who else? Let's tap somebody else
exactly
to pay for this.
Somebody else has got to pay for this. Exactly. That's what it is. It's never the thing is, it's never we're spending too much. It's always, where do we get more money? That's always the answer.
But it's always the answer, but it's not the answer. The answer is, when you look at these revenue projections, there is no more revenue coming in. There is the bump in production. And I wrote a long article a few months ago about why this is, what's going on inside the tax code, and what's going on in terms of the shift in production from state lands over to federal lands, which means the royalty. We're not getting royalty from federal lands production, and why these production numbers or production revenue numbers are doing what they're doing. It's once you've worked through the details, you understand why it is. But there is no huge bump in revenues coming down the road. There is no oil and gas cavalry that's coming over the hill. Yet we continue to have people saying, well, yeah, we got Willow and Pika, so we can afford to spend on this. We can afford to spend on that. We can afford to spend on the other thing. It's not coming. It's not coming.
All I could say is
welcome to the party, pal.
That's right. Welcome to the party, pal. We're all about to pay big money no matter what. All right, Brad, we're getting ready to go to number 2. You want to give us a quick tease?
Yeah, our number 2 is our first take on the coming election. Now that the candidates are in.
All right, candidates are on the way. We're going to have more about this. Don't go anywhere. The Michael Duke Show continues. Brad Keithley is our guest. We'll return in just a moment. Common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio, and the weekly top 3. It's all next, right here.
If you missed the show, you can listen to it on your time with Dukes On Demand. Oh, and it's free. Like America used to be. Streaming live every weekday morning on Facebook Live and MichaelDukesShow.com.
Okay. Brad Keithley, our guest, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. Sorry, I got hashtag video host problems here this morning. I trimmed my beard this morning and didn't realize that it had covered my shirt with hair. So I'm just trying to get it all out there. Anyway, Brad, reading this article, it just, and this guy said that he had proposed this idea 19 years ago, and why didn't we take it up? Why didn't we take it up then? This again is indicative of the problem that I've talked about, and one of the bones of contention, I guess, between you and I. I'm all about talking about potential revenues and whether it's a tax or whether it's something. But the thing is that my contention has always been, if we do create some form of new tax, flat tax, or tax the oil companies more, or do whatever, they're just going to spend it anyway, because they have continued to spend everything available anyway. Even if we try and say, well, if we offset it over here, then of course they'll have to give the permanent fund back. And my contention has always been, well, they'll just take the new revenue and they'll spend the permanent fund, right? Because this is what they're doing. This is what he's pointing out. He's making my point for me.
Well, Michael, it's a bone of contention only when we leave out the spending cap part of the discussion.
True.
I think when we include the spending cap part of the discussion, then we've capped spending, and we are truly talking about replacing one source of revenue with a more equitable source of revenue. Where you and I get in problems is when one of us or both of us forget the spending cap, and we start leaving the impression that we're creating additional revenues. I've never argued for additional revenues. What I've argued for are replacement revenues to replace the use of what ICER Professor Matt Berman has called the most regressive tax ever proposed, and to recognize that we need revenues to replace those revenues with more equitable revenues, and all that within the context of a spending cap, so that we aren't adding more revenues to the overall picture, right. that we're keeping them in a box. And we're simply swapping out one set of revenues in the box, most regressive tax ever proposed, swapping out one set of revenues in the box for another set of revenues that are much more equitable, and in fact also work as an incentive because they reach the top 20% non-resident industries and oil companies. Also act as an incentive to stay within that box, and indeed go below that box by pushing spending down. So it's not, I understand the layer on argument. And I understand how sometimes we trip into that argument by not talking about the spending cap. But I think the spending cap's a key part of that. And once you layer that on, then the argument from my standpoint, becomes a lot clearer.
Well, I will acknowledge you are 100% correct. If we can get the spending cap, then my argument then becomes moot, because they're forced. Well, I guess if they follow the law, they're forced to then live within that means and live within that cap, and the monies will have to be shifted around. But the problem is, again, we have no political will to actually create a cap that means anything at this point, which is frustrating. That's step one, right? Step one is creating the cap. Step two is enshrining the permanent fund, payment in the Constitution in some way. Then it's reducing government. Then it's creating some kind of new revenue stream. It's all those things, but nobody gives a crap, Brad.
Well, then that's the argument for we're all doomed. And why are you and I talking about this? Because it's just a doom loop. I mean,
sometimes I wonder.
Well, if there's no overarching plan, if there's no spending cap, replace the most progressive tax ever proposed. If there's no overarching plan, then we are doomed. Because yes, we'll just keep spending more and more and more and more, and we're all doomed.
Well, you're looking at the new slate of candidates, so you tell me: are we doomed? Are we getting more of the same, or are we actually going to make it? I mean, whoopee, we're all going to die, says Brian. I don't think it's that bad, but I got questions. So Brad Keithley, our guest, will continue the Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio. Like, share, subscribe, ring the bell, do all the stuff. Let's do it. Here we go.
Public enema number one. Oh, wait, sorry. Public enemy number one, which makes more sense. On the other hand, he's a little bit of a pain in the Michael Duke Show.
Oh, yeah. We're continuing. Number two, the weekly top three. Brad and I were just questioning whether or not we're doomed. I don't think so. Otherwise, I wouldn't get up in the morning and do this. I'd lay in my bed and huddle and rock back and forth. I think we can do something, but boy, we've really got to. We've only been going on about, you and I personally together have only been going on about this for 10 years, Brad. I've only been talking about it for 25 years in total. I would think that somebody eventually might hear what we're saying, but let's get on to number two, which is the slate of candidates. You've looked at them, you've seen them. So what are your thoughts? And I guess you can work in if we're doomed or not with these candidates, but let's get into it.
Well, I think the word that, as I went through the slate of candidates, I think the word, and you know me, I'm just coming at it from the oil and from the fiscal policy standpoint. That's how I'm looking at all of this. I think the word that came to me is potential. There's the potential that we have a slate of candidates who could put together a solid fiscal plan going forward and sort of get us out of, for those who want to go back in the podcast and listen to what happened during the interim, get us out of what's otherwise becoming a doom loop. I think there's the potential for that. But here's what I'm going to be looking for. And let me start with the fact that Ben Carpenter, from an oil and fiscal perspective, Ben Carpenter is sort of my ideal, because I think Ben Carpenter gets all of it, understands all of it, sees all of it, and is willing to step up and talk about all of it, which is where, frankly, we lose most of the rest of the slate. You've got to have somebody who will get up and talk about, we're spending too much and we need to do something about that. And James Kaufman, for example, senator from South Anchorage, will be happy to get up and talk about that. We'll be happy to get up and talk about a spending cap as part of the solution to that. And other candidates probably will be happy to get up and talk about a spending cap as part of the solution to that. But that's not the complete solution, because as we've talked about on the show before, and as these numbers that we just went through in the first segment show, oil revenues are falling away. So if all you have is a spending cap set at, say, 2.5% or 1%, or just pick any sort of spending cap you want, if all you've got is spending cap, what's happening is the traditional revenues are falling away, leaving a larger and larger gap between the traditional revenues and what you've set as the spending cap. And that's just putting more and more pressure on permanent fund dividends. It's leaving permanent fund dividends exposed as the source of revenue to fill in that gap, increasing permanent fund dividend cuts. So it's not enough just to talk about a spending cap. you've got to talk about replacement revenues. We've got a box. We're going to define the box. We're not going to spend any more than what's in the spending cap, defined by the spending cap. But because of the fall in traditional revenues, you've got to talk about replacement revenues, or else all you end up with, like Kaufman leads to, all you end up with is additional cuts in permanent fund dividends. There are two sources of additional revenues that I think people need to focus on. One is oil taxes. We are not collecting the revenue maximizing level of oil taxes that the Constitution would seem to call for. Yes, we did a good job in 2013 in setting new tax rates, but the world's changed over the last decade. Oil companies have changed over the last decade. Oil company costs have changed over the last decade. It's a different world now than where we were in 2013. We did it right. I will defend 2013. We did it right in 2013. But as the world has evolved, it's become unright. And we need to address that by having some level of revenues, having a tax system that increases the state's take of revenues as production volumes go up, instead of the state's take of revenues going down as production volumes going up.
Right.
We also need to close the Hillcorp exception, or the Hillcorp loophole. It's not the biggest number in the world. It's $100 million, escalating up to $132 million by the end of by FY33. But it's about 5-6% of overall petroleum revenues, and it helps. And we need to close that as well. But those two things, addressing oil taxes, and we got a $1 billion plus problem, right? Even if we define the spending box as what we're spending now, with just a very slight increase going forward, even if that's how we define the spending box now, because of the decline in traditional revenues, we've got deep permanent fund dividend cuts now. We're going to have increasing permanent fund dividend cuts if we don't have substitute revenue. So oil takes care of part of that, takes care of maybe around half, maybe 40% of that deficit. But we've got to have replacement revenues to preserve the permanent fund dividend, to preserve Hammond's vision of sharing the money with Alaskans. We've got to have replacement revenues that come in and take the place of those permanent fund dividend cuts. And serious candidates have got to talk about that. Ben does. Ben had a bill, fought for that bill in Ways and Means to substitute permanent fund dividend cuts with sales taxes, statewide sales taxes. He gets it. I mean, he's laid out the plan for candidates to be serious, for the potential of the candidates we have out there to form a solid fiscal caucus, to form a solid fiscal plan going forward. And frankly, when I talk about a fiscal caucus, I'm not talking about just Republicans. I'm talking about Democrats who believe some Democrats who believe in the permanent fund dividend as well. To form a solid fiscal caucus out there, we've got to be talking about replacement revenues. There are candidates out there who have the potential to do that, but they are also candidates who, frankly, whose inclination is not to do that. James Kaufman is the perfect example. Kaufman says, "Oh, I get it. We got to control spending. I get it.
Right.
And so I'm in favor of this in favor of this spending cap. I've got it.
Right.
Vote for me. I'm a fiscal conservative." No, what he's got is 1/3 of the plan.
Right.
1/3. He's got the spending cap, define the box. Yes. But we need replacement revenues. The second step of the plan is oil tax reform, which includes addressing the oil taxes and addressing the Hillcorp loophole. And then the third part of the plan is substitute revenues to replace permanent fund dividends for the remainder of it. We need candidates who are going to step up and talk about all three. And there's the potential. We've got the potential for candidates out there who would step up and talk about all three. But like James Kaufman, I'm concerned that they also have the potential to just stop at the first one and not talk about the second two, and not have the guts, like Ben Carpenter has, not have the guts to step up and talk about the other two.
So as you look at the numbers and you look at the names and you look at the people who are there standouts? Are there ones that you are thinking immediately that these are people that need to be talked to or have the questions asked? Who is a iffy and who is good? I mean, do you have? I mean, is Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets going to be issuing a questionnaire to the candidates? What are we going to do here?
We did that in 2014. It was not a great success. Kevin Meyer just used excuses to avoid it, and everybody else fell in line behind Kevin Meyer to avoid it as well. And we saw why, because Kevin Meyer didn't want to be tied
you'll
down.
remember, because 2014 was the first year that you and I were working together on the program, and we asked many candidates, do you support the idea of the ICER, only spending to 4.1 billion? And they were like, oh yes, we believe that. And of course they immediately went right past it, that same year, and was like, well, we meant it, but we didn't really mean it, kind of thing. So who's the winners and the losers in this? Who's the goods and the bads or the question marks? When you look at this list, what do you see?
Well, there's potential. I mean, you got Mike Cronk, who's running to replace Click Bishop. That would be a pickup. There are people opposing him. Savannah Fletcher, who's the current, oh gosh, I get these confused. I think the president of the North Star, the Fairbanks North Star Borough Assembly, but I could be entirely wrong. She could be chairman of something else.
She's just a member of the assembly, but yeah, she's on the assembly there.
But Savannah Fletcher's running against him. So there's that. Cronk isn't a lock. And Cronk also, Cronk was on House Finance this past session, and House Finance just rolled rolled early in the process as opposed to late in the process like they did the previous year. They rolled over on protecting the dividend. They rolled over on looking at oil taxes. They rolled over on looking at replacement revenues. I mean, Ben couldn't even get sales taxes out of the Ways and Means Committee, but they rolled over on looking at replacement revenues. They just rolled over. So Cronk has potential. I mean, he's a perfect example of somebody who has potential. He's a conservative. He talks a good game. He talks about getting spending under control. He talks about living within our means. But like James Kaufman, who I've grown very leery of, like James Kaufman last time, it's that's maybe where he ends. I mean, getting spending under control may be where he ends, and he doesn't take the additional steps of finding replacement revenues inside that box as traditional revenues are headed down. Ron Gillum is running for his old seat against on the Kenai. Ron his heart's been in the right place. He's articulated the right things about getting spending under control. But will he follow Ben? Will he pick up Ben's standard and say, look, I want to, yes, we need to get spending under control, but we also need to address the revenue side. And that means we need to look at oil taxes, and that means we need to look at the Hillcorp loophole, and that means we need to look at replacement revenues for PFD cuts. Will he take that next step while he's running? So you can go through the list, and you can actually piece together a legislature that would be conservative on the first line on the spending cap, but and they all have potential, I think, to follow Ben's lead and step in there and say, and yes, we need to do other things, and here's the other things we need to do. But will they follow that lead? And will they have the guts, even in the campaign, to step up and say,
right,
they'll follow that lead? So it's I think going down the list, you find potential, but you don't find certainty that if you elect these people, you're going to end up better off than where you are now.
Yeah, I mean that'll be the question for John Hillier, who's the replacement for Ben Carpenter, who's the Republican running for. He's one of the Republicans running for Ben Carpenter's seat. We'll be asking Hillier, do you follow Did you follow the fiscal policy working group? Do you support Ben Carpenter's move to, put together a coherent and a holistic fiscal plan, et cetera? And that should be a question that gets asked of everyone at this point. Even though, like I said before, back in 2014, we asked them, hey, do you believe in only spending $4.1 billion like ICER said? Oh, yes, we believe in that. And then, of course, they don't remember a thing. It's all vapor and smoke. All right, Brad, final thoughts and then tease number 3.
Well, I'm looking forward to the campaign. I think there's, as I said, I think there's potential candidates out there that can help move the needle, but we're going to have to talk to them and ask serious questions about, are you ready to step up to parts 2 and 3 of an overall fiscal plan? And if you're not, then, maybe the Democrats are. It's one of those things that I'm issue driven. I'm not party driven. So, Andrew, some of the East Side representatives, Donna Mears, Andrew Gray, have talked about needing have talked about, firming up the PFD and standing on the PFD and stopping, using PFD cuts as the revenue source. Okay, let's talk about that. Are you willing to step up on the other side and do the other things that need to be done to make sure we preserve the PFD? And we may get yeses out of them. And that would be, I'm for putting together a fiscal coalition, not so much driven by one party. So those will be the questions we'll be asking as we go along.
Well, this is what happens when conservatives don't stick to their conservative roots. People start looking in other places. They have nobody to blame but themselves. If they espouse conservative viewpoints and yet they refuse to continue to cut back on the size and scope of government, what do you expect people to do? At some point, they'll look to other places. It's insane. Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. The weekly top 3 continues. The Permanent Fund Board. Oh, man. They keep coming back up in the top 3. The final one is going to be about them. We're up next. The Michael Duke Show, Common Sense Radio.
If you missed the show, you can listen to it on your time with Dukes on Demand. Oh, and it's free. Like America used to be. Streaming live every weekday morning on Facebook Live and MichaelDukesShow.com.
Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. Terry just said Democrats. But that's the thing. If the Republicans refuse to hold to their platform, hold to their oath, hold to their philosophies that people vote them in on. Let's face it, when you're looking at a slate of candidates, you would assume that people who, maybe not now, but 10 years ago, you would have assumed that people with an R next to their name are part of the smaller government, more fiscally conservative group. And that's not necessarily the case. That's why I said you really can't even look at the legislature as party versus party anymore. It's big government versus smaller government. It's government is the solution for everything versus the private economy should be the driver for everything. And that's the difference.
And I would add one thing to that, Michael. It's big government. And I'm thinking of Gary Stevens and Bert Stedman now. It's big government. Neither of whom are running for re-election this cycle, but just to pick on them as templates. Both of them are big government in the sense they want more government spending, but they're also problematic in terms of their funding that additional government spending on the backs of middle and lower income Alaska families through PFD cuts. They don't have the guts to step up and say, yes, we need additional government spending and defend that. And then say yes, and everybody should pay a proportion, some contribution to that. They're not doing that. They're saying yes, we need additional government spending, but yes, it ought to come at the expense of PFD cuts. There's all sorts of variations like this. The Kawasaki Hajukovic, help me, Fairbanks.
Hajukovic.
Okay. Anyway, Weed. Leslie, her maiden name was Weed. How about that?
Yeah.
Leslie, we'll just call her. That race is going to be interesting. Scott says the right things about the PFD, but he's never acted on them. He and Wielechowski were in this coalition, two big PFD defenders in the Senate coalition. I thought, okay, well, maybe there's some potential here. Nah, they just rolled over. And so, Scott talks a good game, but he's never acted on the good game. Leslie, I'm concerned, frankly, is another Kaufman. She'll talk a good game about government spending and capping government spending, but she won't talk about replacement revenues for PFD cuts. And so she'll end up being like another Kaufman or another Stevens or another Stedman or one of those that just has round heels, will roll over when it comes time to funding whatever government spending is being set. So, that race, I'm not sure there is potential in that race between Kawasaki and Leslie. Scott's disappointed too many times. He had control. He had the chairmanship of the Senate committee that had control over constitutionalizing the PFD. There was a bill in the Senate to do that. He never even brought it up. Senate chair, he was the committee of that committee, could have brought it up, had the ability to bring it up, never even brought it up. So I've listened to his, I'm a strong PFD advocate enough, and then seen no results out of it that I'm pretty skeptical of what he's doing. But I'm not sure we got a big pickup on the Republican side on that issue, on fiscal issues. So that's why I say potential.
Well, and I would agree. We talked to Leslie Hajdukovic here not too long ago, and she was a little shell shocked. I'll put it that way. When I put a lot of questions to her, and she's like, she basically said she wasn't ready for all the questions that I asked, and wasn't ready to answer a lot of them. And that's understandable. This is a big deal, but she best get ready. Is what I've been basically saying, because this is the big game. This is where you're going to have to answer these questions, and now is the time to get into it. I think that there's potential there, but is it? It's a step in the right direction. It moves away from Kawasaki and his kind of glad handing and just kind of talking the talk, but at the same time, it's not another Ben Carpenter.
But is it a step in the right direction? We've got Republicans who went down there went down to Juneau and said they're fiscal conservatives. In 2018, went down there and said they're fiscal conservatives. Dunleavy proposes a budget that brings us back to traditional revenues, does what he said he was going to do during the campaign. His budget did what he said he was going to do during the campaign. And then we had Republicans who went down there and said they're fiscal conservatives and then rolled. When something in their district was going to be cut, and Dunleavy in the end couldn't even get 16, couldn't even get what he needed to support his level of budget, to uphold the vetoes that he would have had to make to go back to his original budget. So it's do we really gain something when we've got a Democrat who talks a good game but doesn't do anything, and we got a Republican who can't even talk a good game, and you're skeptical about what they're going to do when they get to Juneau? Are we really gaining anything?
Yeah. Well, I guess the gain on this one is that at least Hajdukovic is not Kawasaki. Is that the gain? I think at this point, I don't know. All right, let's jump back into it. Here we go. The Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio. Like, share, subscribe. Let's do it.
The Michael Duke Show. Not your daddy. Wait, sorry. Not your daddy? Ooh, not your daddy's talk radio. Huh. Whew. I was scared for a second. Thought we were going down. Here's Michael Dukes and the show.
Okay. Finishing up the weekly top three. Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. We've been talking about it, it seems like every week for the last few weeks, but they just keep getting back into the news. It's like they can't help themselves. The Permanent Fund Board continues to just make waves or make the headlines. Brad, they've now decided that it was nice the legislature wanted them to do a certain thing, but, it'd be a shame if we just did our own thing, right? That's kind of where we're at right now. Give it to me here.
Well, yeah, the Permanent Fund Board's been in the headlines. Poor James Brooks, he can't write fast enough. They do one thing and then he has to write another story about the next thing they do. One thing that was in the news this past week was the legislature clearly told them to shut down the Anchorage office, not have a satellite office in Anchorage. Permanent Fund Board met, said, "Yeah, we're not going to do that. we're going to keep the." I mean, the legislature went so far as to change the line item, the appropriation for the Anchorage office at $100.
Right.
That's
it's $100 budget. That's it. Yeah.
I mean, and we all hear about the power of appropriation and how, the legislature has the power of appropriation. And they went so far as to line item the Anchorage office at $100. And the Permanent Fund Board is still saying, we'll just move money around. We don't really care what you're saying. So that's one thing. And then as soon as James gets that article done, there's another article on the Permanent Fund Board. They're going to hire lawyers to come in and investigate, not so much Ellie Rubenstein's conflict of interest in the pressure she's been putting on the Permanent Fund Board staff or the Permanent Fund Corporation staff to favor her or talk to her favorite investors, investment advisors. Happens to be the ones that are also invested in her private fund, but not so much Ellie Rubenstein's conflict of interest in that regard. They're hiring lawyers to come in and look at how the emails got leaked out of the Permanent Fund Board, out of the Permanent Fund Corporation that highlighted Ellie Rubenstein's conflicts. And so James had to write an article on that. It's like every week there's something else going on. But here to me is the kicker. And it finally, all of my thoughts about the Permanent Fund Board crystallized when I was reading an article in the Financial Times, the London-based Financial Times, which had an article within the past couple of weeks headlined, David Rubenstein's daughter, one of the richest men in the world, David Rubenstein's daughter at the center of $80 billion Alaska oil fund clash. And it went on and described all the stuff that's going on here. Here's the paragraph that finally crystallized for me what the problem is. The ongoing dispute at the U.S.'s largest state sovereign wealth fund underscores the governance challenge facing a 6-person board comprised mainly of financial laymen. That's the problem. A 6-person board comprised mainly of financial laymen. And what you really have is a 6-person board comprised mostly of aspiring politicians. Adam Crum, who wants to run for governor, Jason Bruni probably wants to run for governor, Commissioner Anderson from the Department of Transportation, who's beholden to Governor Dunleavy, others who owe their allegiance, their appointments to the board to Dunleavy. What you really have is not even a 6-person board comprised mainly of financial laymen, although it is that. It is a 6-person board comprised mainly of politicians pursuing their own political agendas. That's the core of the problem.
Right.
So when they have a situation like the leaked emails about Ellie Rubenstein's conflicts of interest, when they have a situation like that, their answer isn't a professional one. Oh my gosh, how does this situation affect our ability to produce the highest returns? It's a political one. How do we find the guy that leaked it, or woman? How do we find the person that leaked it and wreak havoc on them? When Adam Crum was off in the Wall Street Journal writing an op-ed this past week, attacking CalPERS, the California Retirement System Fund, their sovereign, their retirement system fund, attacking CalPERS. For CalPERS was supporting an investor at Exxon who was trying to get Exxon to be more concerned about climate change, and Adam Crum was off writing in the Wall Street Journal attacking CalPERS for attacking Exxon, and Adam was defending Exxon. Basically it was Aoga called up and said, "Hey Adam, can you do us a solid and write a counter op-ed to what CalPERS is doing?" And put it in the Wall Street Journal. And I'm sure Adam said, "Wait, you guys are down for supporting my campaign in 2 years, right?" Oh, well, of course,
right.
Right. It has nothing to do with producing the highest returns off of the permanent fund. It has everything to do with political positioning for Adams' race in 2 years. And that's what we've fallen into. We've got a board that the FT correctly describes as a 6-person board comprised mainly of financial laymen, but they're budding politicians or aspiring politicians as well. What we need to do, and I'm now gonna go on this kick full time and start writing columns on it, op-eds. What we need to do is we need to do exactly what the legislature did in the late 1990s when the then Alaska Public Utilities Commission went off the rails and was doing all sorts of weird stuff and just had gotten out of control. The legislature needs to come in and sunset. I mean, you can't fix it. It's just too far gone.
Right.
It's structured wrong. It doesn't have the right expertise on it. It doesn't have the right focus on it. What the legislature did in the late 1990s was come in, sunset the APUC, and created the Regulatory Commission of Alaska, the RCA, set different standards on members for the board, set a different regulatory system, internal regulatory system up for them, and just started the thing all over again. We need to do that with the permanent fund board. Just sunset the existing permanent fund board. I don't care if you call it, permanent fund board 2 or whatever the heck you call it, but we need to sunset this board that is the gubernatorial appointed only, no legislative review, and composed of 6 financial laymen / politicians that are running it. We need to put requirements on there that these are professional people doing professional things, focused on returns, not focused on writing op-eds for the Wall Street Journal or trying to get the members of the Permanent Fund Corporation to listen to an investment advice from people who are supporting me.
Right. No, I mean, I have to laugh because Adam Crum is quoted in this article as saying, as the trustee and as the commissioner of the Department of Revenue, he says it's very clearly the executive branch's authority to move money around and to avoid essentially the appropriation process. To just, they can just move money wherever they want and keep the office open because. I think that this vote, if nothing else, proves that this board is out of control. I mean, the board is supposed to be under the auspices of the legislature and of the governor, but if they continue to just basically give them the finger, which is what they're doing here, that shows that they are out of control. 30 seconds, Brad, finish up.
Well, there's one other thing. I mean, it goes back to the setting aside money to invest in Alaska only, Alaska businesses. They invested in Peter Pan. Peter Pan's now gone bankrupt and is falling apart. So there are a lot of things that this board has done that need to be used as examples for what the next board shouldn't do, but we need to get to the next board.
Yep. I would agree with that. Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. Brad, thanks so much. I appreciate it. We will talk to you again next week.
Michael, as always, thanks for having me.
Folks, out of time. Hour 2 is dead ahead. Be kind, love one another, live well. If you're going to stick around with us, otherwise we'll see you later. I mean, the chutzpah of this board, all 4 of them commenting in one form or another, basically would do what we want. You can't tell us what to do. We'd do what we want. That's essentially what they're saying here. And as you said, you can see Adam Crum has already got the politician's disease of we know better than you what we should be doing around here. And it's crazy. It's absolutely crazy that this is where we're at. But this board needs to go. There's no doubt about it. Like you said, they're more interested in the witch hunt than anything else.
It's not just the people on the board. That's part of the problem. It's not just the people, it's the structure of the board. And that's why the FT article, the Financial Times article, just helped me crystallize it. 6-person board comprised mainly of financial laymen. We don't have expertise on the board. We've got Dunleavy and his buddies. We've got, Adam, who's running for governor, and maybe Dunleavy supports in 2 years. We got Jason, who, a wannabe run for governor. We've got laymen. We don't have guys who, understand Wall Street culture, understand investment culture, understand, driving for returns. A guy who's driving for returns would not care about an Anchorage office, or wouldn't care about writing an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal. He's sitting there, green eye shades, focused on getting returns. That's the kind of board member that you want. And they're not going to make the investment. That's why you've got the professional staff, but you want somebody overseeing the professional staff, giving guidance to the professional staff that understands, what we're trying to drive at, not trying to drive at political objectives, in-state investment, all that other stuff. We're trying to drive at green eye shade, best possible return, end of statement. We elect politicians to do political things. Let the rest of them write op-eds for the Wall Street Journal. But we need guys in the permanent fund board that are focused on returns. And I don't think we get there just replacing the current members. I think we have to, like the legislature did in the late 1990s, I think we have to restructure the thing, reset the requirements, reset the process for how we decide who the board members are, and go from there.
Shouldn't the board be made up primarily? I mean, you can have a public member or two, but you can have a public member that has to have some kind of background in investment and finance. I mean, but shouldn't at least the other members of the board, the non-public members of the board, shouldn't they have, some kind of financial acumen?
Yep.
Some kind of experience with this? I mean, to me, that would make sense. If you're going to put experts on a board, that's what the board's supposed to be. The oversight board's supposed to be some kind of experts. Wouldn't it make sense?
Yeah. We've got an advisory board. I mean, basically what we need to do is flip the advisory board and the board itself. We've got an advisory board that is composed in part of people with financial backgrounds and with investment backgrounds and with an understanding of the investment industry and investment opportunities and how you think about these things. We've got an advisory board that does that. But they just advise, right? They're not the board. And so we got a board. They're advising a board that's then off on the frolic and detour of, we got to invest in Alaska businesses because we want to invest because we want to be big shots and we want to invest in Alaska businesses. And we got a board that says, we need an Anchorage office because, we need an Anchorage presence, big investment center, Anchorage. And we got board members who are off writing op-eds in the Wall Street Journal. We need to flip the advisory board. Maybe we can have a political advisory board that the big board can then ignore. Or as you say, maybe there's room for one or two public members. It's not a bad idea to have the commissioner of revenue on the board, assuming you got a commissioner of revenue that actually understands revenue. There are different ways to do it, but this board is not working, and it's more than simply the members of this board. It's more than simply replacing the members of this board. It's the structure of the board. And the legislature needs to go in there and restructure, and they can do it legislatively. There's nothing in the Constitution that sets up this type of board. They can go in legislatively and reset the structure of the board.
Well, we can only hope that somebody out there is listening to what we're talking about and thinking the same thing. I mean, at this point, I would be, if I had some kind of control over this, I would be so embarrassed about what's going on. I'd be like, I think we have to do something different. And as Harold points out and has been pointing out the last few times, and again, even a stop clock is right twice a day, the permanent fund is in trouble. The markets went into record high. The fund is stalled at $79 billion. It has been stalled. It's not been doing the increases that it was previously. So what's going on there? I mean, do we have a board that's paying attention to that, or are they more paying attention to the infighting and the new furniture and the new office and their op-eds and the Times and working with their friends in Wall Street? Is that what they're more focused on rather than what's going on with the fund? And it would seem, based on that comment, that they're focusing on all the wrong things at this point.
Yep. I don't disagree with that. I don't disagree that their eye has been taken off the ball and their eyes on balls that don't matter. And their eye is on, pursuing political agendas. Political agendas as opposed to financial agendas. Yeah.
They're serving themselves instead of serving the public, which is, again, a very politician thing to do at this point.
So I think this this is a cause I'm taking on. We have got to restructure this board. Alaska has now grown. The permanent fund board has now grown, or the permanent fund corporation has now grown too large in terms of assets. It's grown too significant in terms of its importance to the state. The board needs to be restructured, to be professionalized, and to be reoriented toward getting the highest dollar returns as opposed to all the other things that they're off doing.
What are you looking for this next week, Brad? Quickly here.
How the candidates start to develop, what the candidates start to talk about. I expect to be contacted by a few who want dollars, and I'm going to ask some questions, and we'll see where that goes. I mean, but it's top three: spending cap, replacement, restructuring oil, and replacement revenues for permanent fund dividend cuts.
Thank you, Brad. Appreciate you coming on board. Appreciate you being part of it today. Folks,
Thanks,
we
Greg.
got more coming up. The Michael Duke Show, Common Sense Radio. Here we go.
Whoa, buddy. Put that thing back in its holster. We haven't gone anywhere.
I don't understand.
Check out the MichaelDukesShow.com for information on how to get access to the podcast.
Welcome to the party, pal.
The Michael Dukes Show.
The greed and the entitlement is astounding to me.
What more could you want from a low-budget radio program?
This is a dumpster fire.
That was just BS.
It is time to get a new perspective.
We know just what you need, and we've got just the cure. Open wide and prepare for a steaming hot cup of freedom.
I just don't fathom it.
The Michael Dukes Show, streaming live across the world.
Live around the world on the interwebs at michaeldukeshow.com and across the state of Alaska on this, your favorite radio station and or FM translator. Good morning and welcome to the program. It is hour 2 of the big radio show for this beautiful Tuesday. Oh man, it is it's going to be a nice one, I think, today. Fingers crossed. Fingers crossed. We're going to try and make it a nice day. As we go through, hopefully we'll start to see some warming and a beautiful summer laid out here. Tuesdays, we just finished up with Brad Keithley from Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. And we're going to kind of recap a few of the things that he talked about. We'll talk about a few of the things that are going on around the state. And then in the second segment of the program today, we're going to get an early visit with Chris Story, who's going to come on board and talk with us about his latest book, which is just released. We'll get his take on that and learn about it and figure it all out. So second segment will be all about his book. And then the third segment will be about his weekly positivity update. He always gives us kind of the PMA boost in hour 2. And so we'll finish the show out with that today. To see what we have. It's gonna be fun stuff. I hope you stick around for it. All right, we're just finishing up with Brad, and let me just tell you what the main takeaway from everything that he talked about here in the last hour of all 3 of the weekly top 3 segments. The main problem that we have, working backwards from the Permanent Fund Board themselves, is this idea that somehow they know better than us how they should do their job, how they should spend our money, how they should, in the case of the Permanent Fund Board, put their offices together, that they don't have to follow. We don't need no stinking appropriation process. We can do it for ourselves. That's kind of the direction that they're going. They just, again, basically gave the legislature the finger and said, we know better than you. It's really galling for bureaucrats to tell politicians that they know better than them at this point. And then, of course, we've got the brand new crop of politicians, and there's a bunch of them out there. Some of the big ones that are making me, concerned are, again, the Savannah Fletchers of the world and more going into this and basically saying, we're going to right all the wrongs and make Alaska much better with nothing more than government spend. There's a lot of these races out there that I'm seriously concerned about, and it's not all Democrats. There's a lot of Republicans out there that I am seriously concerned about because, again, they have an appetite for spend that is almost unprecedented. And I'm talking about people like Jesse Bjorkman. I'm talking about people like Louise Stutz. I'm talking about people like David Wilson. I mean, there are folks out there who basically see no downside to taking the permanent fund dividend away from the people and utilizing it for government spend, including the idea that somehow down the road that this will just continue in ad infinitum, that it'll just for into infinity, we'll be able to do this forever, when that's not necessarily the case. And we know it. The numbers show the governor's projections show that they will be gone. And some of these races, for example, the House District 11 race between Julie Colomb and Walter Featherly. Now, Walter Featherly is upset about the no veto override on the school stuff. And it's been 5 years maybe since I talked to Walter Featherly when he ran for office somewhere else. So I don't recall everything other than he's kind of more of a moderate in the middle. But even Julie, who was reportedly a fiscal conservative and who came out with some really good stuff in the very beginning about the budgets, even she has her pet projects, in this case, the child care issue, where we're talking about $7 million going to, between the combination of tax credits and outright payments by the government, it's going to be $7 million for that. She's all about keeping us fiscally conservative, except for specific issues. We saw that when the governor put out his budget in 2018, 2019, and when they had the veto overrides, and they could have supported him. But some of the candidates out there, I'm thinking the one that comes to mind most blatantly is Delana Johnson, didn't vote to support the governor because the projects in their district or the funding in their district that was being cut was too painful. Oh, I'm all for cuts, just not in my district. And I don't mean to beat on Delana. It's just the one that came to mind right off the gate, right? It wasn't just her. There was a lot of other ones. All he needed was 16, and he couldn't get it. And so it's not just the Democrats that I'm worried about in this field of folks. There's a lot of Republicans that are making me go, what? I mean, I'm worried about it. I'm very worried about it. And then, of course, the opinion piece that Brad started with in number one, which was this idea that what we now need is a permanent fund for education. A permanent fund for education. Again, talking about how the residents of Anchorage are paying for, because this gentleman who's Dr. Ken Wynn, he's a dentist in Anchorage, he's saying, residents in Anchorage don't want to pay $5,000 to $8,000 per year after they retire for property taxes. The Anchorage Assembly is effectively forcing seniors out of their home due to the taxes being so high. But there's no discussion on, are we spending the money in the right places? His immediate answer is, we need to spend more money on education. There's no question of living within their means. There's no question of, are we spending money properly? Are we getting a return on our investment for what we're spending? The school budget is $17,000 per student, almost $1 billion for the school district. Are we getting what we're paying? There's no question about that. The question is, how do we get more money out of somebody else? And this is the problem with opium. OPM, other people's money. It's also the problem with opium, the drug. It's the same thing. It's it's never a question of, are we spending? Again, I've said for years that it used to be, we would have this argument about whether it's a revenue problem or a spending problem. And the politicians would always say, well, it's a revenue problem of some kind. It's just, we just don't have. And I would always argue that this is a spending problem. I have to live within my means. Businesses and corporations have to live within their means. Mom and pop and Joe Bob down the street have to live within their means. Why don't you have to live within your means? Why instead is it, well, we just have to go find more money somewhere else? or we'll take it from the permanent fund, which again is a self-licking ice cream cone that's going to go away eventually. You know, is it 3 years? Is it 5 years? Is it 8 years? I mean, I would say sooner rather than later, because of the just kind of the overall greed of the politicians. They just can't help, but they just can't stop themselves. But I mean, eventually it's going to go away. And yet in this whole article, and this is a long opinion piece, Dr. Wynn never once asked the question, are we getting a return on investment for the money we're spending now? His argument is somebody else should pay for it, or some other mechanism should pay for it, in this case of creating a permanent fund for education, which would have to have some seed money. So somebody's going to have to pay for that seed money. But never does he ask, are we getting what we're paying for, and are we spending things in other parts of the budget that are not education that could be spent more properly on education? It's just a question of how do we get more? He even acknowledges in this piece the permanent fund was an idea of genius because policymakers in the 70s knew that no politicians of any party could be trusted to not spend every last nickel available to them. This is the same today. Overspending and no long-term thinking for solutions. It's the only acknowledgement that he gives to the base problem that we have here in this state. The base problem is they never saw a dollar that they didn't want to spend. This is what Hammond talked about. If you go back and read his writings, after seeing that first payment that the state received get spent like, I mean, again, I want to put it in perspective. That first payment was nearly $1 billion. It was $900 million and change for that first royalty payment to the state. At the time, the state budget was $162 million. They got a royalty payment that was 7 times what the annual budget of the state was. And what happened? They spent every dollar of it. And in some cases created programs that would continue to consume that kind of money. And the state budget they've never looked back. I mean, if we'd continued on the same rate of inflation and growth that we have today, that $162 million budget should be somewhere in the mid $2 billions. That's where it should be based on inflation and growth rate of population. Instead, we're spending twice that, $5.4 billion. We never saw a dollar that we didn't want to spend. And as much as I admire Dr. Wynn's idea of saying we should create this, this idea of a royalty fund or a sovereign wealth fund for education or for whatever, because it's worked for the PFD and it's worked for the power cost equalization fund and all this kind of stuff. Well, that's all great, except for the question is, how is the money being spent now? And is it giving us what we want? And will more fix the problem? And he even acknowledges that the politicians will just spend every last nickel. So if you give them a permanent education fund, will they just spend that and then ask for more from the state or more from the taxpayers? The answer is yes. That's the problem. The answer is yes. More. M-O-A-R. They will always ask for more. All right, we got to go. Chris Story's coming up next, The Michael Duke Show. We will continue in just a moment talking about his new book. We'll be back right after this.
Listened to by more staffers in Juneau than any other show, because their bosses told them to. And after what they just heard, oh man, they're going to be pissed.
You're a bad, bad man.
The Michael Duke Show.
Okay. Let's continue. Let's continue on. It's a clown show, says Brian says, but Michael, you just don't understand. Yeah. Unfortunately, I think I actually do understand. I just don't understand it from their perspective as to why they think that they are God's gift to all of us. That's the thing. That's the thing. All right. Let's see if we can get Mr. They call him Mr. Story. See if we can get. Look at that. Look at that.
Good morning, Michael.
Hello, my friend. How is you this morning? Are you all ready for this little doodad here that we got going on?
Absolutely. I'm on top of the world. How about you?
No complaints, my friend. Nobody listens anyway, so why bother complaining? Because it just doesn't matter. I actually really don't have any complaints. Life is pretty darn good right now.
Good.
Are you ready to talk about your new book, which is called The Millionaire Maker? Am I right? No.
Yeah,
right.
You got it. No, that's exactly right.
Okay, good. And no, Harold, the title of Chris's new book is not Want a Prosperous State, Vote Borbridge. Sorry. He's looking for an endorsement, Chris. I think he's looking for your endorsement at any time. So it'll be good.
He's running for office, is he?
Yes, he's running for Senate against James Kaufman.
All right.
Well,
you going to host a debate potentially? Host a live debate?
Oh yeah, no, we'll do what we can do here, and will be interesting. But yeah, it'll be fun. It'll be an interesting conversation for sure. You're going to send me? Did you send me the manuscript of this so that we can start doing some reading here, or what?
I have not yet. I need to do that. You just say you want that in PDF, right? Not Word.
Yes,
PDF?
please PDF.
Okay.
Otherwise, I'll be typing words in for you, and you would not want that.
Yeah. Definitely, it's call Michael Dukes.
Exactly. Call Michael Dukes if you just send me money. That's The Millionaire Maker is how to make me a millionaire. Just send me money. That's what it's all about.
All we need is 1,000 people to send $100.
Exactly. And what is the topic for our PMA segment today? Just out of curiosity as well.
Working full-time on your job and part-time on your future fortune.
Okay.
You could just title it Future Fortune. How about that?
Future
Two
Fortune.
words.
Future Fortune.
Keep it simple.
I like that.
Stupid.
That's alliterative. Future Fortune. All right. So we can do that. All right. Anything else you want to report on how you did? You went to the big place where dreams go to die, or no, the happiest place on earth. Which one was it? I forgot.
Yeah. It was a good trip. Florida. We were bi-coastal. Michael, that means we were at both coasts.
Right. No, I thought yes. Okay. Wait. Let me scratch this off my list.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay. Wasn't sure if you needed to look that up, or it's not necessary. We were on the Gulf of Mexico, and then we went over the Atlantic, which is kind of cool. You can actually cross the state of Florida in 2.5 hours. And that's what we did. Had a great time. And then we ended with 2 days in hell. I mean, Disney. And it was great. 98 degrees, though, and humid, with a couple little kids that are paper white with you that you have to constantly lather in zinc. It was fun. We made good memories.
98 degrees
no
and 105% humidity. It's perfect. I mean,
exactly. What could you have? And $8 a bottle of water. I mean, come on.
Yeah.
They've got it figured out.
Exactly. I know. I was joking around because I saw somebody posted, "How do you get into Disney's park with 4 people for less than $1,000?" And you said to me immediately, "You don't." And I'm like,
Right.
I haven't been to Disney in 40 years, 45 years. I think I was 10 or 12 years old the last time I went there. And I had no idea it was that expensive. That's just, oh man, it's the happiest place on earth for somebody. Anyway, let's continue ahead here. We'll jump back into it. Chris Story is our guest. The Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. Please like and share. Please like and follow. And let's get to it and talk with our guest, Christopher's story. You ready to do this? Let's get it going on. Here we go.
The Michael Duke Show. Seriously humorous with a pinch of intellect. Sorry. That is humorous. Here's Michael Dukes.
He's so mean. I mean, he's almost as mean as Chris Story. I mean, he's almost... welcome back to the program. Thanks for coming in and joining us. Chris Story, the man from Homer. He's a realtor. He's an author. He's a potter. He's a radio show host. He's a man of many talents, a renaissance man, if you will. Today, he comes on board a little bit early to talk about his latest creation, which is a new book called The Millionaire Maker. And he joins us right now. Hello, Mr. Story.
Good morning, Michael. Who is mean? Who is almost as mean as me? Who?
The guy who basically just said I only had a pinch of intellect. Were you not listening? You weren't listening, were you?
Oh yeah. Oh
no, yeah.
Got it.
No.
That happens every week. I thought maybe somebody in the chat room had gone above and beyond the Call of Duty and said something mean. I see that. Okay. Yeah. That was cruel. The pinch of intellect. That was cruel. I hear you.
It was. You're so broken up about it, I can tell. All right. Well, Chris, let's talk a little bit about your brand new book. This is something you've been working on for a while in many forms. It started out pretty small as kind of just an idea. And I know that you passed out a few of the early drafts or the smaller condensed version for folks for free, but now you've got it up as a book, and let's talk about it.
And I wanted to do that. So we've been, so The Millionaire Maker, 6 Practical Steps to Your First 4 Homes, has been, as you just said, available as a free PDF and download for several years and different iterations of it. And it's grown a little bit. I've peppered it with a little more story and stories from my and Tiffany's life as investors. And I just thought, books, nobody throws away a book. It's hard to, whenever I get a digital download from somebody, I don't know where it goes. I don't know where it is. But in my library, I have, over 1,000 books that are not going anywhere. And you hear the expression, nobody throws a book away ever. Even if it's a book you don't like, you're going to donate it to somebody, you're going to give it to somebody. So I wanted to take this to the next level. It's a quick read, probably 35 minutes to an hour for the average person to read this. And I'm hopeful, because we've embedded in it worksheets, I'm hopeful that actually somebody would read through it sort of quickly and then go back and actually start taking the steps. So each step comes with it a compendium worksheet page to say my next step. So my goal and my hope with this, whether it's your first 4 homes or it's health, wealth, prosperity into the future, or just happiness and fulfillment, that this could become a blueprint, and these 6 steps would guide you towards what you want. Identifying first off what it is that you do want, being clear about that, and then taking action steps. It's like Jim Rohn used to say, affirmations will do nothing until you put them into action. You've got to do the labor, you've got to do the work, and this is no exception. And I built right into the book an opportunity for you to do that. So if you pick up the paperback, you'll have pages to write on within the actual book itself.
Let's talk about the concept of the Millionaire Maker to begin with. I mean, you're talking about your homes, getting homes. I mean, you're talking about the real true wealth in this world is not the 15 minutes of TikTok fame or something else. You're talking about, property as a legacy. Is that, am I putting that right?
Spot on. Absolutely. A legacy. I think it's one of the most patriotic things you can do is to own more of your own backyard. And 17 years ago, I started my radio career. You'd already been long in the tooth by that stage of your career. But 17 years ago, I started on radio. And one of the taglines for the first iteration of our show was called Radio Realty. And one of the taglines was, you really can make $1 million in your own backyard. Thus was born a segment called The Backyard Millionaire, which in 2021, we put out the book by that same title, The Backyard Millionaire, How to Create Wealth Where You Are with What You've Got. And that was a parable. And it was an amalgamation of mentors in my life from
It was a parable. It was a parable, not terrible, right?
Wow. Yeah, no, it wasn't a terrible parable. In fact, a lot of people don't like parables, I think, because it's a concept that somebody shoehorns into a story, and it's very
Oh,
dry and mundane with paper characters. And this is actually full of rich
I
context,
loved it.
and it's a beautiful story.
I loved it.
Yeah,
I
thank
probably
you.
read it. I mean, not only did I read it professionally, but I probably read it 3 times, I think, maybe by now, maybe 4. It's an excellent story. I just, I'm sorry. I just wanted to make sure that people were clear that you said it was a parable and not terrible. So that was it.
Right. Well, my friend John David Mann, he writes parables for a living, and to include The Go-Giver, which is a New York Times best-selling book of like 10 million copies sold. He said he sent the manuscript of that to one of his best friends, and he contacted him months later and said, "Hey, did you read it?" He goes, "No, I don't like parables." He goes, "What? Read this one." And anyway, the guy ended up reading it and said, "Okay, it's not bad. I can handle it." But it's not just about an idea. But The Millionaire Maker was a sort of a compendium, the idea being, how do you put this into practical? So that the philosophy is in The Backyard Millionaire. The Millionaire Maker is essentially how to do it, like literally step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5,
An
and 6.
instruction
And if you
manual,
follow
essentially.
those steps, yes,
Yeah, it's an instruction
exactly.
manual. If you read The Backyard Millionaire and you're like, this is all great, but it's a parable and I can't really pull it out of what I'm supposed to do, this is the instructional how-to manual for The Backyard Millionaire.
Precisely, a blueprint, if you will. And it is about real estate. It is about owning wealth in your own backyard. And one of the ideas that prompted that tagline was, "You can make $1 million in your own backyard." Was I looked around one day, and now mind you, this is almost 20 years ago, and the average price of a home in America was $250,000. Homer was no exception. And I looked around and I said, all somebody'd have to do is own 1, 2, 3, and that one over there 4. You'd have $1 million net worth. And if you start today, you'll have that free and clear by the time you retire, or by the time you might have 10 homes free and clear by the time you retire. And I started with the 4 homes. Now, of course, fast forward to 2024, the average price of a home in America is somewhere around $430,000. So really, I could have pared it back to 2 or 3. But the concept is about becoming. It isn't about having the money. It isn't about having it in the bank. It's about having the lifestyle, the freedom, and who you become in the process. And I think that's the magic behind this concept. And the unwoven mystery is, it's very simple to do. You just have to get started. You've already got what it takes, and you can begin to work part-time on your future fortune, which we'll talk about in a bit. But this is really a blueprint, or a compass, if you will, to kind of point you in that direction. These 6 steps can be applied to every aspect of your life: business, real estate, health, happiness.
And we're talking about, this is something that really anybody can do. Somebody said, well, I don't have a huge nest egg. So how do I, get a home, or the first home? I mean, I'm living in my home right now. Does that count? Or do I need to be looking at homes that generate revenue? And I don't really have a lot of money laying around. I don't have a huge savings. I don't have this. Maybe I don't have a retirement. How do I make that happen?
The first chapter is called More Valuable Than Gold. And it tells the story about how my dad came to Tiffany and I and said, "Here, do this, buy this lot, build yourselves a building for your business to rent from yourself. So your business will rent the building from your real estate. You can do this." And we were verklempt. We were, what? We didn't have any spare money laying around. This was 2 years into our pottery business. We weren't cash rich. And he lent us something more valuable than gold. He lent us something far more valuable than money. And it was know-how. So in other words, a blueprint. Here's how you do it. And second to that, he lent us a belief in ourselves that we could do it. And that was enough. But I'll go further and say he also lent us relationships. In other words, he endorsed us to the professionals that we would need to know. He lent us his relationships. And what I say in this book is, I'm loaning you those relationships, the 30 years of experience that we now have in this field. I'm loaning you that. Also, at the very end of the book, there's a page called Connect with Chris. There's a QR code that'll take you straight to my website. My phone number's there, my email's there. I want this to be the beginning of a relationship between you and me. It's not an end-all, be-all. It's a roadmap, but it depends upon you driving. What are you driving? It's irrelevant. You could be in a Mercedes or you can be in a Toyota on its last legs. It's irrelevant. This is the map with which you can use to guide yourself to what you want. And if you don't want 4 homes, fine. You could use this to get to your first home or 2 homes, whatever it is, or health or prosperity within relationships in your life. All of it is mapped out within this blueprint.
The book is called The Millionaire Maker. And again, it's kind of a how-to manual that's a companion piece to The Backyard Millionaire, which is available right now at ilovehomeralaska.com and Amazon and Audible and every place else. Folks, where do folks find The Millionaire Maker, Chris?
Amazon right now. We haven't added it to our bookstore yet at ilovehomeralaska.com. All of our other books are available there at ilovehomeralaska.com. But right now, we just need to update the website to include The Millionaire Maker. So if you go to Amazon, you can find it there pretty quick. By the way, when I was in Florida recently, I noticed there was a pull tab, or not a pull tab, but a lotto called The Millionaire Maker. I had no idea. I was standing in line to pay for some waters in a little tiny convenience store, and I was like, The Millionaire Maker? What's that? It's like anyway, it's a scratchy or whatever you call those things that consume people's monies with no chance of gaining any wealth at all. But this 6 practical steps to your first 4 homes is about taking control of your own destiny and leaving a legacy.
And do you have to read the Backyard Millionaire to get it, or is it something that somebody could pick up and say, okay, I could do this on top of that? Or, I mean, does it help?
Absolutely.
What's the deal here?
No, it's totally self-contained. I do make a couple of references to the story. And for example, as discussed in The Backyard Millionaire, you can't always cut the negative people out of your life. Ergo, I'm here on the show with you. But no, there's references to it, but they're self-contained. This is a standalone piece of art, and you are welcome to add this to your library, even if you don't have The Backyard Millionaire yet. But I'm assuming you'll want them both. They make great gifts. If somebody just graduated, let me put it this way. If I had this in my hand when I got out of high school, I think I would have been able to skip the line, sort of like the lightning passes at Disney. I think I'd have been able to skip the line with this book. So if you know somebody just graduated high school or college, this is an important piece that should be in their library, and it's quick, easy read.
So this is something I should be passing out to all my children, is what you're saying here. You take one, you take
Please.
one, you take one, and you guys could all figure it out. The name of the book is The Millionaire Maker, and it's a how-to manual on how to get essentially your first 4 homes. And this is applicable. I mean, you were talking about Homer, and of course, when you wrote the original piece, the homes were valued at $250. Now they're $400. Of course, if you live in Homer, you could probably double that. Will it work anywhere, Chris, or does it only work in communities that are more in line with the national average?
No, you're absolutely right. It will work anywhere. However, when you get started, you're probably not going to be looking at properties on Rodeo Drive, probably not going to be looking at properties on 4th Avenue in Anchorage. You might need to look outside of the major metroplex or the center. My wife's got a lot of family. Tiffany's got a lot of family in Carmel, California. That's probably not where you're going to get started, but out in the valley. But don't preclude any area. No, this will work anywhere USA, any county, any borough, any state. It's just a roadmap. The relationships you build are going to determine the opportunities you find. And that blueprint and that know-how is built into this book. So it'll be applicable to anywhere USA, but probably not going to start out with the most expensive property in your community. We're looking for creativity, and that's the beauty of real estate. You can get as creative as you want in any town, anywhere USA.
Chris Story, the man from Homer. Again, you can go to Amazon right now, type in his name, and look for The Millionaire Maker. It's available in paperback, soon to be available in audio as well. A companion piece to The Backyard Millionaire, which if you don't have a copy of The Backyard Millionaire, why are you listening to this show? You should go get one. Go get it on Audible. That guy does a pretty good job of reading it. It's a great story. You want to check it out. You can also go to ilovehomeralaska.com to find out all about Chris and what he does. We're going to continue. He's coming up for his next segment, which is his normal Tuesday segments of what I like to call the life coaching lesson, a little PMA. Now he's going to be talking about your future fortune. We're back with more and Chris Story right after this.
Running on 100% pure beard power. Oh, also some coffee. We dip our beard in coffee.
Ha, nice beard.
The Michael Duke Show.
Although Chris doesn't have a beard anymore, so he can't run on 100% pure beard power. That's too bad. That's too bad. It's like Samson. You cut your hair. Now what are you going to do, huh?
I've got the goatee. It'll suffice, won't it? Isn't that enough for you? Isn't that manly enough for you?
It's fine. All right. Okay. We'll let that slide. It'll be fine. And if you don't have your copy of The Backyard Millionaire, you should go to his website and get a copy, or go to Audible and get your copy there and enjoy it, because it is a good read. It's a good story, and it gives me hope. I mean, you know what? After I read this story the first time through, because I always read them through the first time before I narrate them, and I came back and I was just like, this makes me happy. This whole story just kind of gave me a bit of hope, I guess, more than anything else. I came out hopeful. But the problem is I probably needed The Millionaire Maker because I read the book, and I've read it 2 or 3, 4 times, but I still have not put in a lot of the stuff into practice that I probably should have. So I probably needed The Millionaire Maker to go right along with it, to step into it right afterward. Chris, is that what you're finding? People love the story, but they just don't know how to implement it?
It's funny you should say that, because and fortunately for me, I also put my contact information in that book. And people have reached out to me and said, okay, now what? Or I don't have cash. I don't have savings. What do I do next? Or you talk about, in that case, Oscar loans August money, basically by owner financing this property. I can't find somebody to do that for me. But in The Millionaire Maker, step 1 is probably the most critical piece and could bookend the entire conversation. Decide, make up your mind to become a millionaire. And I start with a story about a guy who helped me with an all-terrain vehicle I had, and the hub was broken, and we were having a hard time getting the lug nuts loose. And his name is John Calhoun, and he's just an ace mechanic all around. Talk about a Renaissance man, can do anything with his hands. And he's very smart on top of it. So I'm out at his shop, and he's helping me, and it's tough. And I give up. I throw in the towel. I'm like, forget it. I'll just take it to a mechanic. We tried. And he looked at me and kind of wiped his hands on his jeans and put his tool down unceremoniously and looked at me and said, I thought you wanted to do this. Like, well, I do, but it's really difficult. And he's like, he goes, look, we can do this. And if you don't want to put in any more effort, you could leave now. He's like, we can be done. You can go somewhere else. And I was like, all right. And so he kind of shamed me into continue. And then within 30 minutes, we had them all off. We had all the lug nuts loose, and it was just a real testament to decide, which is from the Latin decidere, which means to cut off. In other words, there's no alternative. This is happening. We are going there. And this is a get rich slowly formula. It takes time. I cringe at the notion of people selling and promoting get rich quick, flip and grow rich, flip in real estate. Those kind of investment strategies have such a burden of risk. And truthfully, what they're doing is selling you their map. It's sort of like, here's an expensive map, take this. And it's like, yeah, but this could go bust just as easily as it booms. Big risk. So this is I'm not saying it's riskless, but with the Millionaire Maker and the whole concept of becoming a backyard millionaire isn't about happening overnight. The Law of Leverage is the next book that we're putting together, and it states that you cannot save your way to wealth, but you can invest your way to a fortune if you can learn to save. And meaning there is a path. It does take time. You've got to have some kernel, some seed to put into the ground, but then you have to water it, and then you have to wait, and you have to weed the garden, and you have to continue to do all the right things. And sometimes luck plays a part, and luck could be a sunny day. And but that you're only going to experience the luck or the fortune if you put yourself in the way of it. And that's what I like about this get rich slowly idea. It takes time. You hear about the janitor earning $22,000 a year or $28,000 a year that set aside a $6 million fortune. Well, how do they do it? Well, the little fine print says it was a 45-year process.
Right.
Oh,
Right.
it does take time.
Which is totally antithetical to the idea that we see today, which is everything is always get rich quick. It's immediate gratification on everything. And I want to see it now. But I mean, that's nothing new. There's been get rich quick people for 1,000 years, right? I mean, there's been snake oil salesmen for millennia. And so this is nothing new. Slow and steady wins the race in this case.
Yeah, it precisely. Yep. And you read about the people that hit something big overnight, and wonderful. You found struck oil underneath your farm and you're moving to Beverly Hills. That's wonderful, and I don't knock it, but it's not the average. It's not how most of us are accumulating and gaining wealth.
Wait a minute. Did you just give me the plot of the Beverly Hillbillies? I'm just asking.
Spoiler alert. Spoiler alert. Up came a bubbling crude.
All right. Chris Story is our guest. The Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. Please like and share, like and follow, subscribe, ring the bell, do all the internet stuff. Let's share this show with other folks to get them involved. Here we go. Let's do it. Chris Story, our guest, your future fortune right now on the Michael Duke Show. Okay. One final segment here of the program. Chris Story joins us in his normal slot for our weekly uplift, our life coaching lesson, our PMA session. Chris, you want to talk with us today about not the get rich quick, but our future fortune. And it's got a longer title than that, but let us talk about the future fortune.
I'll start with a quote from Jim Rohn, who was a phenomenal philosopher. I was going to say business philosopher, but really he was a philosopher, period, just in life. But he focused on business, as you would say. But his quote is, work full-time on your job and part-time on your future fortune. In other words, it was the prelude to what we now call a side hustle. And I think, real estate, just tying back to our Millionaire Maker segment, real estate is an incredible side hustle because it doesn't require you to show up on a 40-hour work week. It's something you could do within the crevices of your week. It's something you can save for, plan for, work on. But any side hustle, one of my favorite stories is the couple of teachers that I met in Anchorage. They had 2 or 3 children, and they were school teachers. And at the end of their school day, after dinner, they'd all get together and make these little jewelry pieces and then go sell them. And they were at all the fairs that I was. And I asked them one day about kind of how well are you doing here? And just like, how much money do you make? But like, what do you expect, to earn out of this fair, this 2 or 3 day holiday weekend? And they'd say, but anywhere between $3,000 and $5,000. And they were hitting all the holiday fairs. And then they did the Saturday market. So I'd see them at all these things, and they're just earning this extra money on the side. It was their side hustle, and they were paying for their kids' college fund through this. So the kids were participating, mom and dad were participating. A simple hobby craft that turned into a side hustle. And it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to become an Etsy millionaire overnight, or, become, next thing you know, you're on Good Morning America with your product. It doesn't matter, because that's such a rarity. That's like the lottery winners. The reality is the people that are earning these side hustle fortunes or working towards their future fortune are truly just like you and me. They're just doing something on the side and adding to what it is they do. Many businesses that I work with, I coach and counsel them, like, you have 2 businesses. One, here's your company. That's business 1. Business 2 is your real estate company. If it owns the piece of real estate or it leases it, it doesn't matter. It's still your real estate business, and it's your future fortune if you become an owner and you have an owner's mindset. So if you have a career or a job and you're working for somebody else, you're a W-2 worker, doesn't mean you can't have an owner's mindset. you can still have an owner's mindset and begin a side hustle where you are with what you've got, no matter what it is you do.
So how should we, because I know that I've always had a side hustle in my adult life. They've always, I mean, it's not like they've been spectacularly successful, but they've always gotten us through. They've helped pay the bills. They've helped, shore us up, shore up the finances and do things like that. There's never been a time when I wasn't working something on the side with my regular full-time job doing things as well. And now it's even better today. It's like I've got 4 jobs, but where do you start? I mean, where do where do people get the ideas? What would you encourage people who don't have a side hustle right now? What would you say to them?
What do you want? Find a need and fill it. The 6 magic words of how to make money or how to make anything come true in your own life. But what do you want? Do you want extra cash flow? Does it sound good to you to be your own boss? And a great way to dip your toe into that arena before you quit your job is to start selling something on the side. Nothing happens in this world until a sale is made. So you needn't invest a lot of capital or any of your resources into something to test it. It's the MVP, minimal viable product. Get it into the marketplace. Will somebody pay you for something you already like to do? Is there a hobby? Is there a passion? Is there something that you do and you'd say, man, I would do that for free? But test the waters. Will somebody pay you for it? And if so, you can turn that into a future fortune. There's a great book called The $100 Startup by Chris Guillebeau. I would read that. Jim Rohn, going back to him for a minute, he said every child should have 2 bikes, one to ride, one to rent. Have a bike that they can rent to a friend, or teach them the business of selling soap door to door if you live in a safe neighborhood, and get your kids involved in something, just like that family of teachers I talked about. They invested time and energy into teaching the kids and training the kids how to make this jewelry such that now they have something they can take forward. And you don't want to ruin a good hobby by turning it into a business. So if you have some sort of a hobby that you just love, it doesn't mean you have to begin it as a business. Many times I've taken something to that level and gone, oh, I don't even enjoy this anymore. That's fine. But if it does sound good to say, I would like to earn an extra $1,000 a month, 2,000, 5 or 10,000 a month. What is it you could start doing on the side and test the waters, find that need in your marketplace where you are. And of course, the internet's made it's sort of equalized the entire world. You can sell it from anywhere in the world and do something. With Tiffany and I were potters, and we'd travel to shows all around the state and outside even. People would say, oh, if we were outside, they'd say, oh, Alaska must be an amazing place, but I couldn't make a living there. If we were selling our stuff at Anchorage or Eagle River or Palm or wherever, they say, oh, we'd love to live in Homer. Just can't make a living there. And that's nonsense. You can make a living, you can make a life wherever you want. And the future fortune is simply what you set your sights on and work part-time towards it. Another quote from Jim Rohn is to work harder on yourself than you do on your job, meaning self-improvement. Read the good books, listen to audiobooks, listen to speeches, TED Talks. There's a million TED Talks out there talking about anything that might apply to your future fortune and how to improve upon yourself. And it doesn't matter if you've got a degree, diploma, no diploma. It doesn't matter where you're starting from. It depends upon where you're looking and what do you really want and what's that first decision you're willing to make. What are you willing to cut out of your life so that you can begin to build that future fortune? You've got time.
What did Chris Story do early on? What was your side hustle in the very beginning? What were you doing where you were working a job and then you decided to start something new?
That's a great question. So first, I was working for a pottery company in Anchorage, also working on the ramp at UPS from 4 to 9 in the morning, and then selling water purification. All 3 of those things melded into a lot of opportunities and relationships. We then moved out of state, and I was working for a pottery company and cleaning, did janitorial service and so forth. Moved back to Homer, fast forward, working at a hardware store, which is sort of the narrative within the Backyard Millionaire book. And at that time, also selling pottery, teaching pottery, and became an apartment building manager. And that all wove itself into, in 2002, beginning my real estate career. But the side hustles had never stopped We now have a production company, a properties company, our real estate brokerage, and radio program. So we are constantly doing side hustles. But if, like I say, pottery was something that for me became that first side hustle, to a point where, Michael, I was so naive. I was knocking on doors in Vancouver, Washington, where we live, saying, hey, I'm going to be teaching pottery classes out of my garage over here. Maybe your kids want to come? And people slam the doors like, who are you? Oh, okay, I'm just a guy trying to teach pottery here. So it's always been something that, and even still to this day, I make pottery mainly for myself. But at the same time, I'll make something and go, I think I could sell this. I think I could sell this. So it becomes just a habit almost. And it could be anything. But again, real estate for me as investing has been a side hustle for the last 25 years. And that's never going to change. Tiffany and I will always do that.
We're down to the last 3 minutes here, but let's tie back in the Millionaire Maker and the Backyard Millionaire. Could the side hustle be as a property owner? Could it be as a property developer, something you could do on top of your 9 to 5? Is that something that would make sense?
Oh, absolutely. Real estate dovetails beautifully with earning a future fortune and working part-time on your future fortune. That's what I love about it. Like step one, I said, is to make up your mind to become a millionaire. Decide. Once you've made that decision, step two is assemble your team and become the CEO of YOU. And that team is paramount. It's so important. Nobody is an island. I was just reading a book this morning about Henry Ford and all of the relationships, starting with his wife. The author said, absent Mrs. Ford, there'd be no Ford Motor Company that we know today. You've already probably got a partnership. You've probably already got the perfect partner for your side hustle or business and or real estate investment company. So start it. Get an investment account going. Open a separate account in your bank, even with $5 or $100 or $1,005. It doesn't matter. Open that account and in your mind, become an investor today. Read the good books, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, Richest Man in Babylon, my books, Backyard Millionaire, Millionaire Maker. Start a library. All of this can happen totally on the side without any money. Understand your credit, get pre-qualified so you can know what you can do, then decide what you want to do. None of this is sleazy, oily, or anything. It's all about designing your own blueprint on your own timeline and at your own schedule. You really can get rich slowly in your own backyard. And if you do something slowly like health or wealth, it's more sustainable and longer lasting.
Right. And this is for the long term. Again, this is not a get rich quick. This is the long-term proposition. And that's what we need to be focusing on. Chris Story, the man from Homer, ilovehomeralaska.com. His new book is called The Millionaire Maker. It's a companion piece to The Backyard Millionaire. Working on your future fortune. Just that little side hustle can help, but you got to make the decision. Chris, as always, it's been my pleasure to have you on today. Thank you, my friend, for being part of it. We appreciate all you do.
Thank you, Michael. It's my pleasure.
All right, folks, tomorrow is another day. We've got, we got some folks coming in. Mike Shower is going to actually be on Thursday this week. So we'll see who we get in for tomorrow, but it should be a fun show, regardless of what happens. Be kind, love one another, live well. We'll see you tomorrow. All right, my friends. Well, we appreciate you guys all coming on board with us as usual. Thank you for being part of it and sharing your morning with me. I can't tell you how much I appreciate that. And we're gonna keep things rolling. It's gonna be a good summer. It's gonna be a good summer. Lots of stuff happening. Lots of changes going on. All right, I'm done for today. We will see you tomorrow. Have a good one.
We've shed our terrestrial radio skin, and now we are slimy lizard internet people. It's the Michael Duke Show.